Hello, everyone. It's my utmost pleasure to welcome you on this PEFC public consultation webinar. This time, we are discussing PEFC Brazil, a long-awaited webinar to a very important country in the global forestry arena. We're very happy that we have this webinar today. My name is Hubert Inhäuser. I'm a technical officer at PEFC International, and it's my pleasure to be your host today. We have only a very brief program for today. I will deliver a brief introduction about PEFC International for those who are not that familiar with the PEFC Alliance. And then I'm very glad that we have Evelyn Fagundes with us from the Forest Management Institute, who will present the Brazilian forest certification system. Thank you again, Evelyn, for being here with us today. And at the end, there will be availability for all the speakers, for both of us. If there are any questions, we are very happy to answer them at the end. So with this brief introduction, let us look into a little bit more details about PEFC International. The acronym stands for Program for the Endorsement of Forest Certification Systems. We are an alliance of independent national forest certification systems under the umbrella of PEFC International. All of these national certification systems are based on PEFC's sustainability benchmark standards, or they are adopting the international standards, what we will develop. This is an absolutely voluntary mechanism promoting sustainable forest management through independent third-party certification. We are very proud that we are the world's largest forest certification system and provider of 3/4 of the world's certified and sustainably managed timber. On this map, you can see our global coverage. As you can see, in Latin America, there's about roughly 10 million hectares certified, and about half of that come from Brazil. So a bit more details about the webinar that we have today. The Brazilian forest certification system was submitted for assessment in May this year. This assessment will be carried out by an independent assessor yet to be appointed. But on today, when we have the webinar, we already launched the 60 days public consultation. This is an international public consultation. We encourage all stakeholders to take a look at the complete Brazilian forest certification system documentation, which is available on our website, and everybody can raise comments or even maybe a question for the documentation, and it's available for 60 days. So we opened this public consultation today, and the deadline for submitting comments is 15th of September. Please note that all of these comments which are submitted during this international public consultation will be considered by the assessor in the assessment report. So again, we are very much looking forward to have your comments on the Brazilian forest certification system until 15th of September. And that was it really from my side. And I would be happy if Evelyn would take the floor now. I will stop sharing, and Evelyn, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for this webinar, for sharing your time with us. I'm Evelyn Fagundes, the technical manager of the Forest Management Institute. And we have here other special people that have been contributing with the process: Camila Marangon from IBA, Aline Tristão, Adriana Nozella. So I'm going to be presenting this webinar on the revised PEFC Brazil. The public consultation had the objective of the re-endorsement of the scheme and includes the revision of the management system of the PEFC Brazil. So the first Brazilian PEFC scheme was FLOR, Brazilian Forest Certification Program, which was developed by Inmetro in 2002 and achieved its PEFC endorsement in 2005. In February this year, PEFC General Assembly Postal Ballot 1/2022 approved the transfer of FLOR management and the PEFC NGB membership for Brazil from Inmetro to our new organization, the Forest Management Institute, and a so-called PEFC Brazil. The IPMF decided that the PEFC endorsed system, certification system in Brazil, will be called PEFC Brazil instead of FLOR, to better align with the entire PEFC alliance and improve the recognition and promotion of the PEFC brand among stakeholders, buyers, and certificate holders in Brazil. So this is an overview of the organizations related to the PEFC system in Brazil, which are the Institute, Forest Management Institute, which administers the PEFC Brazil, Inmetro as the accreditation body, and ABNT, which is the Brazilian Association of Technical Standards and the normalization standard in Brazil. So the change in the governance also demanded change in the normative framework in order to keep it relevant, updated, and fully operating. For this reason, PEFC Brazil conducted a full revision of its normative framework, mailing of its administrative documents. Fortunately, this revision aligned with the ordinary and/or mandatory endorsement of the system, which had the deadline of May 14 this year. So the Forest Management Institute was founded in 2021. The governance is composed of the administrative and deliberative bodies with competence defining the institute statutes. The General Assembly, once a year, is composed of associates, contributors, and institutional associates. We also have the Board of Directors, who plays an important role in managing the institute, responsible for direct administration and decision, and includes thematic committees, fiscal council, and scientific and academic council. And finally, we have the executive board, which is composed of an executive director and technical support areas. So here's the numbers of PEFC in Brazil. We have so far for plantation 0.75 million hectares of PEFC certified forest and 3.65 million hectares with double certification, totaling 4.4 million hectares. And for native forests, we have so far 2.8 million hectares managed by communities or companies in the Amazon region. And for chain of custody, we have 35 valid certificates. We also have 8 certification bodies valid in Brazil operating chain of custody, and of the 8, 4 also operate forest management. So I'm going to give you an overview of the forest contest in Brazil. Brazil is the largest country in South America with a vast territory of more than 851 million hectares, embracing 6 biodiversity-rich biomes. You can see the color in the map. The Amazon region corresponds to almost 50% of the territory. We also have Cerrado, Caatinga, Pantanal, Pampa, and the Atlantic forest with 13%. So we have land use and land cover in Brazil is dominated by natural vegetation, about 68%, followed by agriculture and pasture, 31%. This natural vegetation is comprised of forest formation, savannas, and native grasslands. Native forests account for 57% of Brazil's territory and totally nearly 488 million hectares in 2019. So the forest activities in Brazil are mainly plantation and the management of native forests. So Brazil has a strong environmental legislation. The most important forest legislation is the Brazilian Forest Code. It applies to all land use and imposes the need for forest cover in two types of area. You can see the permanent preservation area in the photo, which are among others, the riverbanks and the areas surrounding water springs. PPAs shall be set aside for preservation and may or may not be covered with natural vegetation. Legal reserve is the part of property which must have its covering vegetation maintained, but it can be sustainably used to generate income when authorized by an environmental agent or established in a management plan. The size of this area varies according to the biome where the property is located. So we also have that protected area can be public or private. The public protected areas are indigenous land and conservation units, about 248 million hectares. The latter can be for full protection or for sustainable management. Law 9985 describes the different types of conservation units according to the activities that are allowed to be conducted in each one, as well as its relation with traditional population livelihoods. If the native forest is in public domain, the public forest management law applies and allows the government to grant through binding the legal right for a private entity to manage public forests for logging, non-timber products and services, and only through reduced impact logging techniques. So in 2017, we had 1 million hectares of public forests under forest concession contracts. The concession of public forests for sustainable management can only take place in areas not designated for community, indigenous, or conservation units. And all products from native forests must be accompanied by a mandatory license documents for transportation and storage, the document of forest origin. For plantation, we also have several legislation. Plantations are also subjected to the Brazilian Forest Code, the main forest legislation in Brazil, and other legislations such as the license process by the competent environmental agency and some other regulations. You can see more in the report. And yeah, we do have several environmental laws in Brazil. So moving ahead, the country has around 9.55 million hectares of forest plantation, mainly with eucalyptus, 78%, and pine, 18% species. In 2020, we had 4.4 million hectares with PEFC certification, as I mentioned. And regarding native forest management, the main region where the activity takes place in Brazil is in the Amazon region, which has around 132 million hectares of forests that could be candidates for sustainable forest management. Of this total, 8.9 million hectares are public forests that are already formally available for concession. 30.6 million hectares are public forests that could be subjected to concession, and 92.4 million hectares are forest designated for community use. We also have private land, naturally. So currently, only 39.2 million hectares are under concession. In 2021, 2.6 million hectares were certified by FSC or PEFC in the Amazon region. In terms of plantation main products, we have some significant numbers. Wood panel, the volume produced in 2020 was 7.1 million cubic meters. Brazil is the 8th largest producers of wood panels worldwide. Laminated flooring, this product reached an increase of 14 in sales volumes, totaling 11.8 million square meters in 2020. The pulp and paper chain, Brazil is holds the 2nd place in the global production ranking for pulp, and it's the 10th largest global production of paper, which means 21 million of tons of pulp and 10 million of tons of paper. And charcoal, Brazil is the leading global producer. So, and also there are other industries such as pharmaceutical, chemical, cosmetics, textiles, food, and so on. So in terms of native forest main products, we observe a reduction in its activities in the Amazon. In 2020, this production dropped to less than 10 million cubic meters, and around 3.2 million cubic meter of sawn and processed wood was commercialized in the main production center in the Amazon. So, yeah, the private lands currently utilized in the Amazon are able to supply 70% of the demand. Regarding impacts, both natural and planted forests can provide positive impacts in the economics of a country if sustainable managed. And in terms of economic impact, sustainable forest management in natural forests and plantations stimulate the formal economy, improve the national economy, and also generates taxes and tributes, which all together contribute to the development of the country. So in terms of GDP, the planted forest-based industry GDP rose 10% in 2020, totaling 106.6 billion reais. It's the 22nd place in terms of its contribution to Brazil GDP, and almost 1% of the total tax collected in the country. In terms of social impact, these activities generate jobs, training opportunities, and the income outside the main economic and financial center. So planted forest-based industry generated over 5,600 direct jobs posts and 1.5 million indirect jobs in 2020. And the management of natural forests formerly employed around 11,000 people in 2018. Meanwhile, the average per capita income in cities influenced by the planted forest-based sector was higher than in Brazil as a whole. So the average per capita income in cities influenced by the planted forest-based was higher than in other cities. On the environment side, management of natural forests and plantation directly contributes to the conservation of environmental services, such as carbon, water, and biodiversity in the long term. The planted areas in Brazil sequestered an estimated 1.9 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent in 2020, and stored almost 2.6 billion tons of CO2 equivalent in its 6 million hectares of natural vegetation set aside for conservation purposes. In terms of biodiversity, recent studies have identified that 5,800 species of fauna and flora were seen in areas pertaining to planted forest-based companies. And sustainable management of natural forests ensure that the remaining natural forests are not subjected to illegal deforestation. We will move forward and look into the PEFC structure and standards. PEFC Brazil, as I mentioned, we revised the management system so far, and PEFC Brazil has these 5 main procedures. Each procedure has the normative reference, scope, objectives, terms and definition, and its requirements. Some may also include sample contracts, agreements with the parties. You can see on the public consultation. So procedure number 2, requirements for certifying bodies auditing forest management and chain of custody, is the largest procedure and established certification requirements for CBs, certified organization, including the issuance of certificates, addressing non-conformity transition, notification, maintenance fees, and also reference qualification criteria for auditors, and gives other provision. It also sets requirements for public summaries of audit reports and define that there should be specific guidelines to be provided in exceptional situations such as pandemic, war, etc. Procedure number 5, requirements for group certification, is completely based on the PEFC standard 1002 2018, the group forest management certification standard. They are all based on the most up-to-date version of the PEFC normative document, the ABNT standards, which are based on ISO, such as 19011, 17021, 17065 for chain of custody. So in terms of the normative structure, we are so far considering the international PEFC chain of custody standards 2002 and 2003, and the trademark PEFC rules standards 2001. In addition, there are 2 forest management standards developed by ABNT, the standardization body in Brazil, which are the standard 14789 for planted forests and the 15789 for native forests, and forest plantation with genetically modified trees are not allowed. Stepping into the revision process, it was carried out in 2 phases. Phase number 1, the 2 sustainable forest management standards for plantation and native forests were revised by the ABNT. And phase 2, IPMF, as the system manager of the PEFC Brazil, developed the remaining documents that compose the PEFC Brazil's normative framework. So phase 1 had the objectives of the revision process for both standards, plantation and native forest, the re-endorsement of the PEFC Brazil scheme, and the revision was based on the most updated version of the PEFC standard 1003 version 2018. At the time phase 1 was carried out, Inmetro was still the manager of the system, and the phase 2 is, as I mentioned, is related to the the IPMF as the NGB and the system manager. We've developed a strong quality management system with the support of stakeholders related to the first certification in Brazil. These aim to be in compliance with the PEFC standard and adaptation to the economic and social environmental context in Brazil and to the productive model of the forest sector. So in terms of the ABNT structure, which is, as I mentioned, is responsible for the revision and was oversighted by Inmetro, the manager at the occasion. ABNT is the Brazilian standardization body, founded in 1940, is a founder member of the ISO, and therefore developed its standards based on the ISO principle. ABNT follows the procedure for the public announcement of the process at least 4 weeks before the revision on the website and through newsletter. This is an overview of this is some of the ABNT procedure because they have its own organizational structure, governance, and management system. So far, they have procedures for stakeholder mapping, the study commission, and etc. They also have different channels for receiving comments and complaints on the website, through phone, emails, and the public announcement for national consultation are allocated on the ABNT website and through newsletter as well. So this is an overview of the timeline for the revision process of both standards, which occurred in parallel. They have 2 different revision processes, but they both occurred in parallel. So the first general meeting was held on January 2019, and so with the process announcement, and then 2 different working groups were established. And from January to November 2020, the 2 different working groups were drafting the standards. The public consultation was a 60 days period and occurred between November 2020 and January 2021. So after the public consultation, the working groups had some discussion and evaluation of the comments and elaboration of the final draft between January and February 2021, and had a special meeting in February 2021 to analyze the results of the public consultation and invited all the stakeholders who provided comments. And both standards were approved in February 2021. And the publication was in March 2021. Both standards are available on the ABNT website. So for plantation, it was the 4th edition approval, and for native forests was the 3rd edition approval. And as I said, both occurred in parallel. So for the revision process, the working groups were composed by interest or affected stakeholders, forest owners, business and industry, could be indigenous people, non-government organizations, certification bodies, work and trade union. So ABNT has a study commission which defined the list of mapped stakeholders, and this list had more than 400 invited stakeholders at the moment. So the invited stakeholders were informed about the scope, objectives, and steps of the revision processes. The working group had a balance of representation between parties, and the invitation was always had a minimum of 10 days in advance, and ABNT has a SharePoint where the working group members and the involved stakeholders can access and provide comments, check all the documents, and so on. For these true revision processes, no pilot test was needed. So as I said, the public consultation had a 60 days period for both standards. The standards were posted on the ABNT website and through newsletter. As a result, the forest management plantation standard had 14 approvals without restriction, 4 approval with observation, and 2 non-approval due to technical objection. And the native forest management had 19 approvals without restriction, 4 approval with observation, and 1 no approval due to technical objection. So, and after the public consultation, the working groups, the data tabulation and analysis took over a month, and in February, a special meeting took place to discuss the results and make decisions on both standards. So 26 February 2021, not this year. All parties who provided comments were directly invited to this special meeting, and the stakeholders who had comments came and they discussed both standards in separate moments, and the deliberations were made by consensus, not without voting, and both standards were approved. So both standards were published in March 2021 and are available on the ABNT library website. So now I'd like to briefly share the overall content of both standards. So the forest management standards, they consider the sustainable forest management, including legislation, conservation of natural resources, historic and cultural aspects, productivity, technical, economic, and financial, social aspects. It also considers a general management system for the forest management. And I will briefly highlight the main topics that concern the FM standard, but naturally they are specific to each standard. So for each one, the structure is scope, terms and definition, principal criteria and indicators with 6 principles. Number 1, compliance with laws. 2, rational use of forest resources. 3, concern for environmental, cultural, and social aspects. 4, respect for natural resources in implementing management operation. 5, environmental, social, and economic development in regions where forest activities occur. And 6, assessing performance and continuous improvement. And they also have the bibliography. So the terms and definition were included in the text of the standards and are aligned with the PEFC standard 1003 version 2018 definition. So P1, first principle, it's regarding compliance with all legislation, international, national rights of ownership and of the use of land, social welfare legislation, responsibility, and also a public commitment to perform sustainable forest management. Number 2, principle number 2, includes a management plan approved, adopting strategies oriented toward sustainable use and management, development of the forest resources and or maintenance, permits striking of the chain of custody, and training. Number 3, concern for environmental, cultural, and social aspects, identify and assess environmental value and impacts, the integrity of native ecosystems and biodiversity, measures to identify and protect endemic, rare, and endangered species, exceptional attributes, and conversion, which is aligned with the PEFC standard 1003 as well. Principle number 4, respect for natural resource in implementing management operation, include use of technologies and technical information, the techniques, infrastructure, and forest operation, integrated pest and disease management techniques, adequate measures for storage, transport, and use of pesticide, and the management plan. Principle number 5, includes the identification and assessment of the environmental, social, and economic values for stakeholders, the relationship with local and traditional communities and indigenous people, and effective communication and consultation with the parties. And finally, number 6, it's related to the assessment of performance and continuous improvement, which includes the monitoring and measurement of performance, internal auditing program, addressing non-conformities, and the annual management review. So this is an overview of both forest management standards. And now I can open for question and answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. I think you can stop sharing your screen now, maybe. I can speak for myself, but I think it was such a detailed presentation that when we post it online, I will definitely rewind it a couple of times to take all of it. So thank you very much again for all these details you provided. And now it's time for clarification questions. If from the floor, is there anybody who would like to ask a question for Evelyn? The time is now. Maybe until the participants think about this, I can have one question for you, Evelyn. It's about the conversion, and I would like to hear your opinion on how you presented these increase in terms of wood production and products and so on. And I just wanted to check with you that how do you see the will be there more plantations? Is the conversion requirement which we have, which you worked on, is it enabling to carry this forward, or how do you see this conversion issue in light of this increase to food products, to wood products?
Hubert, sorry, I had an issue with my phone. May you repeat your question, please?
Sure. Just briefly, I wanted to check with you that how do you presented that there's a higher demand for wood products from a number of categories, and I just wanted to ask that how do you see that, how much additional plantation might be required, or the ones which are in place are sufficient, or how is it working out with the conversion requirements which we have? Thank you.
Thank you. So conversion is the plantation standards consider conversion in the same way as the international PEFC standard with the 5% and the exceptional situation where conversion is allowed. So it is, of course, a limited growth, but so far we still have several land available for improving the plantation in Brazil.
Okay, thanks a lot. Meanwhile, anybody has a question to Evelyn? Or everybody's maybe a bit overloaded with the information which you presented. I wouldn't be surprised on that. So if there is no questions from the floor, I would like again just thank for everybody for joining us today, and please revisit the webinar with all these valuable information, what Evelyn collected for us on our YouTube channel. And please don't forget to take a look at the Brazilian documentation until 15th of September. And Evelyn, I cannot stress enough, thank you so much for making the time available and preparing this detailed presentation for us today. Thank you very much and have a nice rest of the day. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.